don't know. You have to pray.
Started about right. Just got steady rain all night. That's right.
Very quiet. Jesus. Yeah. You're a Pedro.
She's
Could I just ask everybody to check their phones to make sure they're on silent? Hello everybody. On behalf of Kathleen, Andrew, Justin, David and their families, I welcome you all here today to celebrate the life of Chris Morris, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a friend to many, and also a respected work colleague. Hello, and those who don't know me, my name is Galen DeJong. It is an honour and privilege to have been asked by the family to be the MC for Chris's life of celebration. I wish to thank those who have travelled some distances to be here today, and for those that could not attend, I will hopefully deliver their personal words and stories through my voice to you. Ian Adams, CEO of the Emerton Park Aged Care Facility, will be delivering a presentation on behalf of the staff, residents and volunteers. We will also share a short video of Chris's close encounter with his beloved saints. My experiences with Chris and Kathleen began at Emerton Park while I was then Leisure and Lifestyle Coordinator. At the time, we played music over the PA system to lighten the mood for the residents, who you would often see singing or tapping their feet to the music. One day, Chris approached myself and Helen Ralston to see what our thoughts were on setting up an in-house radio program for the residents. That was the commencement of what was now called EP Radio. Ian Adams will be talking more on this in his presentation. A highlight of my time while working with Chris was organising a surprise interview with Dan Butler. And for those who don't know Dan, he plays for St Kilda. Bob Palmer, a resident of Emerton Park, who is another dedicated Saints supporter, was also included because of his dedication to Emerton Park, running the footy tipping competition for many years. Chris, Kathleen and Bob were instructed to be at the clubhouse, dressed in their St Kilda gear at a certain given time. And of course, you could imagine the questions I was asked, especially by Chris, always who needs to know, so he can dot his I's and cross his T's. Well, I just told him to turn up and don't ask questions. When finally seated and waiting patiently, a car pulled up with the Southern Cross News written on the side. Well, Chris's neck did turn, especially when Tom Johnson and his cameraman and sound producer stepped out. Tom interviewed Chris and then announced he had Dan Butler waiting to talk to them via Zoom. Everyone will see the outcome on the video, which will be played shortly. Now I will be presenting the family eulogy, which has been kindly prepared by Justin Morris, and I will be then presenting messages from Chris's grandchildren, Ava and Noah, Peter Morris, who is Chris's brother, and Liz Santa Maria, who is Chris's sister. I would now like to I'll do that now. This is the family eulogy by Justin. Hello and good morning to everyone attending today to celebrate Dad's life. Our family appreciate you all being here. Your presence and support helps us in the sad time as we say farewell to a loving husband, father, son, brother, pop, uncle and a friend to many. I know he would be very chuffed with you all being here to honour him, and he would love that his ceremony is being held at the home of the Smithton Saints, who share their name with his beloved St Kilda Saints, who he has passionately barracked for his whole life. He was loyal to the Saints through thick and thin, which is also the way he treated his family and friends. Having several friendships over 50 years and celebrating his and Mum's 50th wedding anniversary last year is a testament to that. Our family is so grateful have celebrated their amazing milestone of 50 years of marriage in Brisbane, and what a wonderful memory for us to have. Mum and Dad were childhood sweethearts and met each other in Smithton. Dad would drive his Vauxhall called Josephine from Launceston on weekends to see her. Apparently, old Josephine wasn't very reliable, but that didn't stop Dad seeing his beloved Kathleen. In 1971, they were married here in Smithton and then settled in Launceston to start their family and eventually having 3 boys. After stints living in Launceston, Brisbane and Helio Beach, they came back to live in the place they first met all those years ago in Smithton. Mum will forever be grateful for having such a loving, caring and committed husband. glasses on. Growing up as boys, could always rely on him being there with Mum to love, support and help us, and we had the best childhood any child could ever hope for. We had many adventures, seeing family in Hobart, Melbourne, Stanley and here in Smithton with Nan and Pop on Montague Road. In Launceston we had many great times seeing Nana Morris and Uncle Peter, the Butchers and the Santa Marias. At home our parents let our house become the drop-in centre for all our friends. Having a pool and a rumpus room made it a popular place to be. Dad would tell the story of walking down the stairs to the rumpus room and having a sea of faces looking back at him. Our friends to this day laugh as they remember him stomping on the ceiling of the rumpus room when we were too noisy. He'd bring a video camera home from work for us, and over the weekend we turned the house into a movie studio and filmed our homemade action movies. We had so much fun playing cricket, football, swimming and playing our computer games. We have many fond memories of Dad growing up. From him insisting on listening to John Farnham for the whole trip from Launceston to Smithton, to watching the Saints on TV with a Foster's beer in hand and passionately willing them to win with some strong words of encouragement. And you knew if they missed a goal with a shout of, "You're crap, Saints," with a stomp on the floor to make his point. We had our special treats of chips, chocolate and fizzy drinks when the footy or cricket was on. Us boys and our friends would see Dad dart around the house doing jobs wearing a striped black and yellow shirt. We cheeky kids decided to nickname him Bumblebee, which led him to chase us around the house as we told him to buzz off. Too much amusement. One of the funniest memories was Dad casually walking around the place wearing undies, to the horror of our friends who didn't know where to look. When he wandered past us boys, he laughed at our friends' embarrassment. Some of our friends didn't have a good home and were so happy to come over to our place to enjoy themselves, and it helped them have a better childhood. They really appreciated our parents being so welcoming and kind to them. Those days and memories made growing up, and especially at 9 Lavender Grove, will forever put smiles on us three boys and our friends. David, Andrew and I will be forever grateful for being raised in a loving home by an amazing mother and father. Our bond to our parents only grew stronger as we became adults, and we cherished visits to see each other in Tasmania and Queensland over the years. Dad had a very sharp mind and was incredibly well organised, which led to a very successful career in the public service in both the Tasmanian and Queensland governments in the liquor licensing division. He was well respected by his workmates and became very good friends with many of them outside of work. In retirement, he took all his experience and knowledge and started volunteering for Coast FM Radio, based in Wynyard. Growing up, he wanted a career in radio, but back then it was a hard industry to get into. Despite his passion never wavered throughout the years, and it was wonderful for him to have the opportunity to finally get into radio broadcasting. He brought his love of music and his administrative skills to assist Coast FM in many areas and worked his way to chairman of the board, in addition to doing what he loved most, broadcasting his radio show Coast to Coast, which included interviews, music and aged care requests. Then he was approached to produce an in-house aged care music requests and information radio show at Edmonton Park. He established the EP radio show, which is broadcast from the John Farnham studio and continues today. Dad produced well over 500 shows for more than 10 years. Dad gave us so much to the community, which he loved doing, and the community gave back so much to him. His legacy at Coast FM and Edmonton Park Radio will continue through the station going from strength to strength, and EP radio show continuing. Dad was very chuffed and proud to become a grandfather to Andrew and Katie's children, Noah and Ava. He adored and loved them so much and made his life complete. They are such great kids and they love their pop very, very much. All of us will miss him so much. We have had to make peace with that in our own time and learn to live without him. But what matters most is the time spent with him and the memories we had. That will put a smile back on our face and make our hearts happy again. We have so much gratitude for having had you in our lives. So rest easy, Dad. We will think of you every day, and us 3 boys will take care of Mum. So as Dad would say, cheers to you all, and up the saints. Thank you, Justin. This little message is from the grandchildren, Noah and Ava. Dear Pop, we wish you were still here with us. We're so sad you had to leave. You were the best Pop ever invented. We always had fun with you. Thank you for letting us play on your recliner whenever we came to your house and letting us have soft drink. Even when Mum said no. We hope you're having fun in heaven. We miss you and love you forever. Hugs and kisses from Noah and Ava. Well done. The next message I have is from Peter Morris, who is Chris's brother. He calls him Kim. My brother Kim, as he was known by the family, and I had a very strong relationship. Although there was 8 years of age difference and we were often separated by distance, our bond was always strong. As a kid growing up, I looked up to Kim as I knew he would always have my back. He used to take me swimming, and after he finished work, he would do his best to teach me, but I wasn't a very good student. I still struggle with swimming today. Most of you will be aware that Kim was a passionate St Kilda supporter. A great shame they couldn't grab a second premiership for him. At least we got to enjoy the one and only flag in 1966. We listened intently to the radiogram in our bedroom. We remained close as the years passed. Kim enjoyed a successful and happy life in both his personal and professional relationships. In closing, my wife Carol and I extend our heartfelt wishes to Kathy, Justin, David and Andrew. I love you, Kim. You fought so bravely. Rest in peace, mate. Liz Santa Maria is the sister of Chris. She has also sent a message. If you Google definition of a brother, the best answer is, a brother loves you unconditionally, even knowing all your faults. Unlike your children, your siblings share your history from your earliest memories and experiences, together with all the highs and lows that life inevitably brings to everyone. Our family always called Christopher Kim, as decreed by our mother, who loved the story of that name by Rudyard Kipling. My earliest memory of Kim is being profoundly jealous that he was the one who got the blonde hair and blue eyes. He was always an easygoing and good-natured child who tackled school with diligence and tenacity. He brought those same qualities to all facets of his adult life, as well as his legendary efficiency and dependability. He was a man who didn't waste words, particularly on the phone. He asked or told you what was necessary, and that was it. He was also very particular about not wasting time. When he was ready to go, so were you, whether you were or not. He derived great joy from his family, his community radio programs and volunteering for Emerton Park. As you all know, he was a St Kilda tragic, which for his sins gave him intermittent joy mixed with frustrated sorrow. Kim's long health battle was fought with courage, dignity and stoicism, with his wonderful wife Kate always by his side. She was the love of his life who gave him his 3 adored sons. If a person's life is measured by the love and esteem with which they are remembered, then Kim's life has been immeasurable. Rest now, dearest brother. Love you heaps. I would now like to invite Ian Adams up to present his message from Emerton Park.
Well, thanks, Gayleen, and thanks, Kathleen and family, for having us here today. Look, I put off deciding what I was going to say as long as I could because Chris, look, despite all he did for Edmonton Park, really went out of his way to ruin, well, I'll call it recent CEO's music listening pleasure at Edmonton Park. And actually, I think he made a bit of a sport of it, really. And really, look, I can't let Kathleen off here because for every barb that we threw at Chris, we always knew we were going to get two back. So, look, for everything I say about Chris, we always know Kathleen was always there by his side, supporting and at times, unfortunately, encouraging him. So, look, Chris had a long association with Edmonton Park, first starting with his volunteering calling the bingo. Look, I wasn't around at the time, so I can't say whether his radio voice lent itself to calling the bingo or the bingo voice lent itself to the radio, but I'll let you make the call on that. And then as Galen said, look, he had a chat with her and another member of our team, Helen, wanting their thoughts on playing music around the facility over the PA system. This idea was well received and implemented, with his first pre-recorded show going to air on the 9th of February 2011. I hope I've got that right. He's not here to correct me, so. But look, and it became quickly became very popular, with Chris playing song requests in interviews from residents and staff. A little later on, Chris had discussions with my predecessor, Rob Barden, about getting some funding and a space set up for a permanent radio studio. This was organised, and by all reports, Chris was delighted when it all came together. He subsequently then spent many hours over the coming years organising music and interviews for the listening pleasure of our team in Edmonton Park. He even managed to get several members of our community in for interviews. And the one thing everyone had in common, I'm not sure if the word was victims, but basically everyone was shaking in the boots at the prospect of putting their foot in it on air, which many of us did. Chris did his homework well, and his time was extremely important to him. The reminders that came in, if you were due to come on air that day, you get phone calls, you get emails, but you made sure you were there. The calls and stories of the people only just making it to the studio on time. I won't look at Galen, but just a quick glance maybe. But look, Chris's professionalism basically overshadowed our tardiness on many an occasion. Interviews are Chris's specialty. If the person wasn't able to make it into his studio, then look out, a roving microphone came looking for you. He stated his favourite interviews were with Robin Moore, also known as Blinky Bill, and his first ever interview that was with Elsie House. There have been many special occasions over the years, but few could top Chris carting his studio and his roving microphone to Launceston to the Aged Care Better Practice Awards. I'm sure to have a little country town aged care facility to have such a brilliant setup that involved residents, staff and our community alike wowed the judges and made a huge contribution to Edmonton Park taking out the National Aged Care Award that year. But Chris wasn't happy to put all this work in just for the residents of Edmonton Park. New transmitters and aerials were soon put up, with Galen and myself driving around Smithton reporting back on where the signal was carrying to. I'm still not sure of some of the legalities around this, but sometimes it's just better not to ask. Nigel Somerville was a big help with this, and look, he asked that I pass on his respect and condolences today. But for all Chris did, he did have his major flaws, and I'm sure a number of his friends and colleagues are happy to support him in. Look, you know who you are. Look, I don't need to single out his faith in the St Kilda Football Club winning another flag, and of course of that artist who just wouldn't go away, Johnny Farmer. Look, thanks to Chris and his friends at Coast FM, I'm not sure whether to expect a Christmas card each year from Johnny Farmer due to the number of songs that are played in my honour, or to watch out for the Johnny Hit Squad due to my extreme dislike of his music. So while Chris had the framed picture of Johnny in his office and would send me a friendly reminder of Johnny's birthday each year, I just threw my darts calmly at the dartboard in my office that had Johnny's picture on it. Look, even despite having his number plate on the car customised to promote EP radio, most people would know is out there, EPR 99.9, Chris took his radio show much further, with aged care requests on Coast FM taking songs from aged care residents and staff from other homes across northwest Tasmania. It just happened to be on air as I was driving in today. Chris once stated he saw music as the universal language, with residents talking to him about the songs they chose and the memories they brought back to them. I think what Chris did was far more than bringing back memories. He helped create them. Chris brought people together, giving them something to think about, talk about, and reminisce about. Chris was many things to many people, but to us, he was a friend and a colleague. He will be sadly missed and leaves us with many happy memories and a lasting legacy in the EP Radio studio and well over 500 recorded shows. We will be renaming the studio the Chris and Kathleen Morris Studio in recognition of all he and Kathleen have done for Edmonton Park over the years, and it also helps me do a bit of redecorating and getting rid of a few things while I'm at it. So after so many years of playing requests for other people, today's requests are all about him and for him. And in signing off and borrowing a well-known phrase, the older I get, the better I was. Cheers.
We'll now play the video that we were speaking about earlier. Get it to work.
We're about to meet Smithton's most vocal St Kilda fans. One-eyed supporters Bob and Chris even preached their saintly devotion on a radio show produced exclusively for residents at an aged care home. Today, the club rewarded their dedication with a surprise from their favourite star.
These are the true Smithton Saints, their memories vivid of that famous 66 flag.
I remember listening to it on the radio in Launceston, and when that final point was kicked, I can remember jumping up and down on the bed because St Kilda had won.
Now it's Chris doing the radio announcing, broadcasting the weekly footy tips to residents tuning in at Smithton's Edmonton Park. Bob's in charge of the tipping, going door to door and collecting nearly 80 handwritten entries each week.
Oh, they love it. And Monday morning they'll get together and whisper and say who's be two and who won.
But there's one tip they always share.
Who's your favourite player?
Dan Butler.
Dan Butler.
Cue Dad Butler.
How are you guys going down in Tassie?
The Saints recruit inquiring about the tips.
Bob, I heard you're running the footy comp this year. How are you going?
Before getting a few tips in return.
I just, you had so many opportunities to win the game against Brisbane. It's unbelievable. And you should have won by that 4 goal.
You want me to shave it off?
Yes, please.
I might get to that soon.
Jokes aside, the candid chat was a thrill for St Kilda's circular head contingent.
Congratulations on your season thus far.
The only thing better, a second flag.
He got a chance, so he's hoping.
Tom Johnson, 7 Tasmanian.
That was good, wasn't it? Okay, I will now continue to read messages from Chris's friends and colleagues. The first message is from Keith Ross, colleague and friend. Christopher Harcourt Morris. A true and trusted colleague and friend for the past 50 years, I feel privileged to be able to say a few words at this celebration of Chris's life. Regrettably, circumstances prevent us from attending today's celebration in person. To Kathleen, Andrew, David and Justin and their families, Noreen and I extend our most sincere sympathy. Chris and I first met when we worked at the Department of Agriculture, 2 George Street, Launceston, some 50 years ago. Chris, with his razor-sharp memory, could tell you the exact date of that meeting, but my memory is not quite up to that mark. We bonded immediately and have been lifelong friends since that time. We have followed our respective careers over the years. Then, of course, as new additions to family arrived, they were also followed with great interest. Chris was a man possessed of many talents. He was a person I admired for his integrity, strength of character, warmth and dogged determination. All those qualities came to the fore, particularly over the past 6 years, as he endured a challenging and painful journey. While his qualities were all of the highest in order, there were none that surpassed his love for Kathleen, Andrew, David, Justin and their families. Noreen and I felt honoured to have had the opportunity to dine with Chris, Kathleen, Elizabeth and Alberto in late July. We are forever grateful. Rest easy, my true and trusted friend. You were a class act. St Kilda supporter extraordinaire, now DJ to the Angels. Sincerely, Keith Rice. We have one here from Brian Shurston from Coast FM. It is with great sadness to note the passing of one of the Coast FM's most passionate volunteers. Chris Morris has directed the path of our station for many years. He was an integral in the resurrection of the management structure in 2013. This has set the station on a solid foundation for our future. Chris worked on his passion not only for Coast FM, but his long career at the EP radio at Emerton Park. His support for those who had limitations in their lives for producing his weekly Coast to Coast Aged Care Request program was received by many with much joy and pleasure. He managed to give so much comfort to so many for many years. I have received many calls at the studio inquiring about his program during the times when Chris was not able to produce it. The experience of being on a tour of Emerton Park with Chris impressed on me the respect that Chris had developed with the people who listened to his programs for many years. Also, I recall the time when I met a bloke in Devonport who was the driver of the cancer treatment bus, whose passengers enjoyed the music of the request program with a regular sing-along in the bus. Chris has brought so much pleasure to so many during his radio career. I would like to thank him for his service. He could not achieve this effort without the support of his wife Kathleen. I would like to thank her for the support for Chris's radio passion. Chris Beaver will be sadly missed from our ranks. We have one from Tony and Judy Sadler. They are work colleagues. We met Chris and Kath through Judy working at Chris's secretary in Brisbane. When he came to work in Brisbane, his work ethic quickly became obvious. He said to Judy first off, "I start work at 8 o'clock and you will too." Later on, we appreciated the generous Morris hospitality while on our visits to Tasmania. Chris loved showing us around his home state and was especially happy when we visit them at Helier Beach. We miss his sense of humour and friendship and send our love to all the family. Tony and Judy Sadler. Memories of Chris Morris from Margaret Mendham. She is a work colleague, or was a work colleague of Chris. I was working in the then liquor licensing division in 1998 when the Morris family moved from Tasmania for Chris to take up a senior role in our office in Brisbane. He proved to be a very kind and thoughtful boss. When Chris retired from the public service in 2004 and returned to Tasmania, my husband and I continued the friendship with Chris and Kathy over the following years. In 2005, Jim and I decided that another trip to the Apple Isle was due. We sailed across Bass Strait on the Spirit of Tasmania and met up with Chris and Kathy for dinner in Stanley, where we were staying in a local motel. It was good to see them happy and well in their home state. We again made the journey across to Tassie in 2008, this time flying and hiring a car. Chris and Kathy had kindly invited us to stay a few nights at their home in Helier Beach. On this occasion, Chris made his very delicious marshmallow meringue, which is a pavlova, a recipe that I continue to use to this day. During this stay with Chris and Kathy, we enjoyed going for walks on the nearby beach and paddling in Bass Strait and driving to the studio in Wynyard to see where Chris volunteered as an announcer on Coast FM. He really enjoyed this part of retirement and playing songs requested by aged care residents and doing various interviews. He certainly was a natural and had the friendly radio voice. Chris had arranged a four-wheel drive day trip in the northwest region which started at Stanley, where we met up with that Bernie, the devil chef, who was our driver and host for the day. And what a wonderful memories we have of that adventure. When driving amongst the sand dunes, Chris declared that he had learnt more about his wife on that trip than in all the years of marriage. Kathy will know that that was in reference to. Memories are certainly made up of fun times, good food and drink, and great company, which we certainly had on that day. Chris was very diligent at keeping in contact and getting together with his old friends when visiting our state. And I remember one night, whilst he was staying at our home, he had gone out with some old work colleagues and returned home a little under the weather. I played nurse by putting a wet face washer on his forehead. Jim and I were so looking forward to catching up with him and Kathy this month, and we share in your sadness as you remember Chris and are thinking of you all during this difficult time. Life brings tears, smiles and memories. The tears dry, the smiles fade, but the memories last forever. Thank you, Chris, for those wonderful memories. This message is from Bevan McCarrick and Nick Gifford. They were workmates of Chris's. We met Chris and his family when Chris came to Queensland to take up the role of Manager Compliance within the Liquor Licensing Division. The role was a difficult role and was involving at the time, with Chris chosen to move the compliance unit into a cohesive unit working together. Chris said at the time one of the convincing factors to move from Tasmania was the cold weather at the time. He had a problem with that, though the first couple of years in Queensland they were the coldest winters for quite some time. Nothing like Tassie, but Chris was looking for Queensland, the Sunshine State. Chris was a very empathetic person who always considered the well-being of the individual, sometimes to his detriment. However, this placed him in a position of being well respected. Chris made many friends in the unit, including Mick Gifford, Margaret Medham, and Judy Sadler and myself. He was highly regarded both professionally and personally. He had a great sense of humour and could see the funny side of things that occurred within the compliance unit. This sense of humour helped to reduce the stress for staff when things were going in the wrong direction at the time. We recall a complaint we were dealing with about a noise from a pub at the Chermside, with the noise annoying an elderly lady approximately 1 kilometre from the pub. The officers could never prove the loud noise was of any concern within the law. However, she continued to complain. Chris had also been fielding some calls from the lady on weekends. As he had been required to give her his work mobile number, Chris had had enough. He went to her house at around 12 midnight one Friday night and sat in his car outside of her house for quite some time. He could hear nothing. Not sure how good Chris's hearing was at the time though. The lady rang Chris the next day and complained. Chris told her that he had been outside her house at that time and could not hear any music, noise from the pub. She said, "Oh," and hung up. Chris said at the time that should fix this little problem and hopefully no more complaints on this one. A good result, Chris. When Chris left the compliance unit in Queensland, we gave him a clock to add to his collection. He loved clocks and commented that it helped him to watch time go by. It was a pleasure having known Chris both professionally and personally. He and his family were great in enjoying life and cherishing friendships. Bevan McCarrick and Nick Gifford. Now the final message is from Terry Butcher, another work colleague. Okay. I was working in Melbourne in 1966 when a fresh-faced, blonde-headed Chris Morris, just 16 years old, transferred from Launceston to the Big Smoke. In the few months he was there, he became good friends and he joined many of us Tasmanians at several VFL matches and, like me, Chris became a St Kilda fan. Chris was unsettled in Melbourne and he decided Launceston was the place he needed to be and he left a few weeks before St Kilda won what has turned out to be their only premiership. But there are more things in life than footy, and his return to Tassie led him to the love of his life, Kathy. I had the honour of being best man at their wedding a few years later, and over the next 50 years we got to spend a lot of time together. And so we lived our lives, sometimes 3 streets away, sometimes 3 hours away, and then 3 states away. We raised our families, we laughed at weddings, we cried at funerals, rejoiced at the arrival of grandkids, and we followed the Saints through an ongoing premiership drought. Just a few points away from a flag, a draw, and lately begging Kingy to kick straight. Along the way, we enjoyed mutton birds and mashed potatoes at Ron Kitty's, fine dining with Alberto and Elizabeth, and our barbecues and pizzas. One thing we both had in common over the years were getting rid of those consistent kilos which defied our efforts to be a little thinner. I was always a few kilos heavier than Chris, but I was a lot taller. For Chris, this included being perched on his exercise bike in his undies, pedalling along at 100 kilometres per hour or walking every day for a year through the cold of a Tassie morning or the heat of Brisbane. We were friends and our families were friends, and we spent so many lovely times with Chris and Kathy and their wider family who welcomed us with such warmth. After many years spent as a devoted Tasmanian public servant, Chris ventured further afield and found a new challenge in Queensland. Several years later, Chris took the opportunity to retire early and they returned to Smithton to enjoy retirement, which included a precious years with Ron and Kitty. Chris brought energy and commitment to everything he was involved with: work, family, his radio work he loved so much, and with Kathy, dedication to the residents of Edmonton Park. Sadly, as it is for many of us, the joy of retirement was interrupted by illness. Chris fought the good fight over several years, supported by his darling Kathy, both of them positive, optimistic and determined but realistic about how things would turn out. And so, a few weeks ago, he quietly slipped away, leaving behind so many he cherished and who had cared deeply for him, and that includes Sandy and me. So it's goodbye, old mate. You'll have a good seat at the same game when the Saints win their next premiership. And I'll be sitting beside you. Rest easy, my friend. Right. In conclusion today, I would like to thank you all for your attendance. The family who invited you to remain here for morning tea and to take your time in talking with them and telling your story. Please feel free to sign and share a memory in the memorial guest book and to help yourself to a packet of memorial seeds which may be planted in loving memory of Chris. Just remember, he hasn't left us, he has just gone before us. And what Chris would say at the end of his program: the older I get, the better I was. Thank you, everybody.